Welcome to Season 5 of the Life Giver Podcast, a place for honest conversation and hope that will breathe life back into your military or first responder marriage. This is your host, Corey Weathers. I'm a military spouse, clinician, and advocate, and I'm bringing topics that I hear from the service community and counseling room to the podcast, where we can face the challenges of this lifestyle together. Welcome to the Life Giver Podcast. This is your host, Corey Weathers. It is summer 2020. Maybe it feels like the apocalypse to you. I don't know, but it feels like that to me in the middle of Texas with just a hotbed of coronaviruses. But I'm so excited to bring to you an interview with a good friend of mine. I met Dr. Keith Mispagel at Fort Leavenworth. He's the superintendent of the schools there on post. And just from the very beginning, talking with Dr. Mispagel about just everything related to being a district that serves military families that are constantly in and out, a post where we move something like 1,200 families every summer. That's a lot of families for him to bring in and are transitioning into a new school system. And so we just struck up a wonderful friendship and getting to know how he serves families and how he serves kids. So I wanted to bring him on the podcast to spend a little bit of time with you where you could hear his heart, not only a teacher's heart, but a superintendent's heart of how he wants to serve military families and how he wants kids to have a really great experience in school. And now more than ever, that is just so important with everything that's happening with entering into a new school season with a pandemic happening at the same time. So Keith, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so sorry that we left your district. I'm so sad, but I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you just to spread your passion for military families and to help them get to know a little bit more of the public school side of serving military families. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Corey. I appreciate it. I'm humbled to be a part of it. And it was sad to see you and your family leave Fort Leavenworth, but fortunate that we had a year to connect and create a friendship that is around supporting education and military families.
Well, I have to say that our time at Fort Leavenworth was short. Most families spend a year there, maybe two, unless they're permanent party. We only got to spend a year there. And when I first met you, Keith, I was one of those parents, right? Like so many of the other parents that come into Leavenworth or so many parents that move to a new installation who are looking into the public school system. And our family, I've not been shy about this on the podcast. We've moved a lot. We've transitioned a lot. My kids have transitioned a lot. And I was one of those parents, even though I'm a clinician that's supposed to have a lot of coping skills, I've also been public about the fact that I don't transition well. Like that's really hard for me. But I was one that was coming in with a lot of angst, a lot of worry, a lot of concern for my kids. And I have to say that our welcome into your district was so warm and inviting and immediately brought down any defenses that I had. And I'll be honest, that was one of the first experiences that I had. And it just turned into a really wonderful relationship with your teachers and your schools there. And you're just doing so many things right. And so I know you're a humble person. I don't know how much you'll agree to all of that, but it was a really good experience. And so what I'd love to start with today is tell everybody a little bit about your journey as a teacher and your passion for kids and how that's gotten to where you are now as a superintendent for District 207 there at Fort Leavenworth.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity as well. As I mentioned before, my journey started. I grew up in Colorado, not a military brat in any sense of the term. My relationship to the military was not through growing up. My dad was enlisted out of high school and served in Vietnam for 4 years, and then got out of the Army. And that was my only introduction to military from that aspect. But moving to Kansas to play college baseball in a small liberal arts college, Benedictine College, met my wife, and now we call that home for our 5 boys. When I graduated as an elementary education major, I did a lot of substitute teaching in Fort Leavenworth and the surrounding areas right out of college. And from that first year of teaching, I fell in love with Fort Leavenworth. the traditions, the historical aspect, the culture, the support, the true dedication to education. And so I was hired on the next year as a first grade teacher at one of the elementary schools, MacArthur, here on the installation. And really didn't know much about military families other than the love for education. And over so this is going on my 23rd year in education and 22nd year at Fort Leavenworth, have grown to understand so many challenges that our military families face. Fort Leavenworth here has about a 50% turnover for our school district population. So out of 1,900 students preschool through ninth grade, we lose about 50% every year. And in a 3-year period, roughly, we turn over almost all of them because permanent party change out every 3 to 4 years as well. So quite a bit of transition. And that's been kind of our model, our motto, our goal is to relieve some of the stress, some of the anxiety, some of the challenges that transition brings with our families. And Corey, from day one, when you and I started talking and you shared some of those initial challenges or fears, or what is this school district going to show, that's what we try and alleviate. We're not perfect. My whole interest in some of our conversations was how do we get better? Every family has different questions, different needs. Every educational system across the states and the world are different than Kansas. And so we want to try and do the best we can for all of the families that arrive here, whether they're here for 1 year, 3 years, or their entire educational career. We want to try and make an impact that is lasting and positive.
Well, Keith, if I can just say, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to interview you, because when you say that the turnover is 50%, that is significant, right? It is, I'm sure, hard for any public school to deal with new students, outgoing students, to figure out how to transition. I know there's a lot of schools, especially surrounding military installations, that really want to find better ways to welcome in those military families and help that transition be a little bit more smooth. But when you say 50%, or more sometimes, I would think, of your student population transitions out, that's an overhaul. Like, I just want to point that out. That is a massive overhaul, not just for, the families coming in and coming going, but I just imagine for your teachers, for your staff, to kind of have to gear up. I mean, not to mention the grief that they may have to go through every year of losing their students, but then to have to muster up that energy to welcome in a whole new set of kids. I picture like one of your teachers who, it takes a lot of intention, I think, to welcome and integrate one child into the classroom. But when half the classroom is new, right, that just takes a whole other level of energy. So I just want to point that out. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to interview you, because you guys have had to embrace this. You've had to embrace this transition and figure out, how do we do this well? So before we get into that, I would love for you to unpack. You got your doctorate. Mm-hmm. Explain to everybody what you got your doctorate in and why you chose it.
Okay, sure. My interest is always as a lifelong learner. And so in pursuit of my doctorate, after my master's in educational specialist degree was really to dig a little deeper into the military family, military culture, and transition. So my dissertation topic related to mobile military families and educational academic success of students. And so it was a qualitative study that I really wanted to dig in and find out how are mobile military families, the transition many times so successful in light of the moves. And so there were five families that were selected and volunteered to be a part of it, that had a 5th grade student that had moved at least 3 times by their 5th grade year, that had been very successfully academically and moved. And so I dug in to find out what were some of those aspects. And it was very impactful for me to truly understand. And I think that's a topic that we've maybe overlooked historically as maybe society or even education is the resiliency that it takes to be a child right now has been greater than any time in the past. So our mobile military connected students have a resiliency that is just part of them that helps them be successful. And so those are two factors that were very significant in the success of mobile military kids academically. And so that was what my dissertation focused on, which also helped drive some of the things that we're doing for families, knowing that we have a high transition rate every year. My goal and my focus for all the staff in the district is that we have sometimes only 10 months to make the biggest impact on every single child. How do we do it? And every child is different, has different needs, whether that's social, emotional, academic, behavioral. How do we have every child remember Fort Leavenworth, remember education, and fondly look at the next step in their life? As a learner, I wasn't the best student. I was average at best, hyperactive, didn't like to sit still. But worked hard as I needed to, but wished I had some additional support when I was growing up to say, okay, here's you as an individual. How do we help Keith? And so that's kind of a focus. Like you mentioned, Corey, we have so many that come in every year that are new. We believe in relationships as one of the very most important things that staff and teachers create with our students. And we have a phenomenal teaching staff here that is dedicated to understanding and creating a positive relationship and learning their kids, because we want them to know that they're important here, whether they're here for a short period of time or a long period of time. That's a true relationship for us.
Well, and I would like to kind of point out some of the things that I think you guys are doing really right. This is about, I really want those of you that are listening to hear this from the perspective of, a lot of times we as parents, we only know our own side. And, that's part of relationships, right? A good, healthy relationship is not only to be self-aware and know what you're bringing to the relationship, but it's often about stopping and listening and getting to know the other side of the relationship as well. And I will be the first to say that because we have moved as many times as we've moved, because we've had issues with our kids within the school system with bullying and all kinds of just navigating being an EFMP family, even with, certain IEPs for how to handle what's going on with him medically. It can bring, when you're bringing a lot of stress to the relationship, we can tend to kind of become that bulldozer in the relationship and see the public school system or maybe even a private school system as this relationship where we're consumers, right? It can be very easy to go into the relationship and go, what are you going to do for me? Right? What are you going to do for my kid? And I know, and I get it, that we tend to do that out of a feeling of desperateness. We do it out of defensiveness, because maybe you're coming from a school district where things weren't handled well, or maybe you didn't understand why they handled things the way that they did. And so those of you that are listening, I really wanted to bridge that gap a little bit with this conversation and try to get to know behind the scenes a little bit better of what the school system is going through, what those teachers are going through each year, and some lessons learned of what we can all do a little bit better. And so, Keith, I just want to kind of point out and say to everybody, first impressions are huge. Unfortunately, we've all been a part of a first impression where you didn't realize that it was a first impression and it went really bad and you have a hard time making up for it, But first impressions really do matter. And it's impossible for us to all get it right. And that's where we need to be graceful and get to know the relationship that we're entering. But I will say, Keith, when I came into your district, I did have that defensive posture. We had just moved. Those of you who are listening who have heard me talk about Maslow's ladder and how we're really at the bottom rung of that ladder of basic needs. And it's really hard to find yourself in a place where you can relationally have relational conversations and build relationships when you're thinking about your basic needs. But that tends to be where that first impression happens. happens with the school system, right? When you're trying to establish order and routine and still trying to meet your basic needs, and you're not quite in the headspace to build a relationship. But that's actually what's happening in that moment. And so, Keith, I will tell you, at the student orientation or the parent orientation where we were coming into the school for the first time, I entered your middle school, and not only was the system amazing for integrating and transitioning that many students at that big of an orientation, right? Like the whole school is showing up to get their schedule and sign up for a bus and whatever. But in that, what I'm going to call chaos, it was not chaos. It was a well-run factory. Let me just tell you, it was so done well. But I will tell you, in my own personal chaos of that moment of thinking it was going to be a hot mess and then kind of being in this shock that it wasn't, right? I was in this headspace of just trying to get all my paperwork turned in and figure out what was happening for my son for the school year. Somebody asked me, is my child EFMP, and does he have any IEPs or any procedures or forms that the school needs to know about? And I was so prepared for yes, he does, then great, let your teacher know. Like that's like on the first day of school. Like that's what I was prepared for. But instead, again, I'm in this chaos moment inside my head, right? Instead, they took me by the hand and took me straight to the principal of the middle school and said, he wants to know. He wants to sit down and talk with you about what's going on with your child so that he is fully aware of who is in his school, the needs of your student, and how we can best serve you. And I literally burst into tears because just like you said, it was about building a relationship. And I kind of pushed back when they did it. I don't know why I did, but I pushed back and said, maybe this is not the time and you guys are busy and I'm sure the principal needs to make sure that all this is running well. Like I was making all these excuses and they're like, no, he has the time. And sure enough, I sat down with that principal. It was a brief but beautiful meeting of just saying, here's what's going on with my son. He's got a mold allergy, and immediately he let me know the state of the school, the state of, whether or not it had mold or not, or just like, that he received my IEP and that he would make sure to connect with me once school got started. And I have to tell you, Keith, it's about modeling that relationship. And I think you guys, because of how you have prepared your teachers and staff for that relationship coming first, it immediately, it just warms my heart. I don't know how else to say it. And so I just want to say thank you for modeling that and teaching that and leading the way in that relationship. Because I think that's the mature side, right? In a mature, healthy relationship, we decide at some point we have to decide, are we going to, whoever on either side, who's going to be the mature one to lead out well?
Right. And I appreciate that. I think it's fair when you think about any enrollment process, and I haven't been to others across the country or for our military spouses in other districts, though I work with schools all across the country through a couple of different national organizations. I hear chaos is part of it. And so what we've tried to do, knowing that it's a fast and furious day or 2 days and that enrollment process and registration, that we try and make it as like organized chaos. One of the very first conversations, Corey, that you and I had was a dialogue about walls that can be put up and how do we break those down. And we recognize that when families come here, they're advocating for their child. And that's whether it's for certain classes or certain housing or special education or health needs or anything across the gamut, that the parents are the best advocate for their children. And we expect that. That means that in some cases defenses are up. What I've learned over time is we need to also recognize that and talk through that and communicate through that. I've been in conversations where it's a back and forth and it could be defensive. Well, it's not about me. I've not had a family come in purposefully with defenses up saying, Keith, you've done this and we need to talk about it. It's more about some experiences that may have been in the past, or some challenges or concerns that a family's expressing in that way. And so from a school district standpoint, it was important for me to understand from you, Corey, and when we had the panel of military to discuss, okay, what should a school expect? That it's how can we help? We're not perfect, and we'll always try to be perfect. I set a goal for all staff that we want to achieve perfection. And that's an unreachable goal in the sense that nobody's perfect. But as I've shared with my staff, if I set a goal of 90% and we get to 89%, yeah, we did well. But if I set a goal for perfection and we get to 95%, 97%, look how much closer we got. And so our work of collaborating and communicating and help break down the walls that come with transition or fears and anxiousness, and just education and helping our parents understand that we want the best for their kids too. That's our number one. We have to communicate that well. And what I've talked with my administrative team about and our teachers and staff who really truly are dedicated is we can't rely on the fact that people say and our scores and things show that we're a good school district. That being a good school district is something that we need to continue to work at doing, but we also have to morph and change. And by changing, if we continue to do the same things every year that have been good year after year without adjustments when new families come in, then we may not continue to morph with our needs. And so really it's a revisit of everything every year. And how do we address concerns? How do we have structures and guidelines in place to make transition easy at enrollment, at registration? We do a parent-teacher conference within the first 2 weeks of school at the elementaries and junior high. And that's not a parent-teacher conference for teachers to tell the parents about their child. It's just the opposite. It's important for us to have those days so the parents can tell the teachers about their child, how they learn best, what their learning styles are. Are they an active learner? Are they a visual learner, auditory? And that's an important aspect for the teacher to learn from the parents how they've known their child to be successful. And so it's a learning process for us as well that really is a partnership. We have had instances where our defenses get up. Like, oh, you're questioning whether I'm doing the right thing. Well, maybe so. That's okay. We want parents to advocate, but we also want to communicate effectively to say, listen, we are all on the same team, because our number one goal is to provide the best education we can for your child while they're here. And communication, relationship, and collaboration is the best way to do that.
You have done a great job sharing some of the things that you guys have implemented. Is there any other tips or things that you've encouraged other districts as you've talked with them nationally about ways that they could help with transitioning students?
Absolutely. I think communication, again, is a number one. And there's no amount of information that is too much to be shared. As parents are comfortable. The more we know about students and their successes, their challenges, their needs for support, their likes and dislikes, the more we can work with the kids. Because as we work with such a high transition rate, we have new students that come in and they're the new kid. And so immediately they have to show some resiliency just to come into a new school, new classroom with new friends. Breaking down those walls has been something that I've loved to observe, because I've watched new students come into the school, walk up to a group of kids on the playground and that are already in a conversation and politely say, hey, my name's Keith. Nice to meet you guys. Where are you from? And now they're in the situation. Now they're creating a friend group.
Isn't that fascinating to watch?
And I have 5 boys myself. We've had them in the same school system from preschool and on up through high school. And I don't believe any of my 5 boys would feel comfortable doing that because they haven't had to face that because they've been in the same system from the beginning. And that's impactful for me as not only a parent, but an educator to say, okay, how do we create a comfortable environment where it's okay to say, hey, hi, I'm new. And hi, I like this. Does anybody else like this? And
can I just ask you to expand on that? Like, how do you create an environment like that?
It's been a growing environment, and one of our best resources to learn how to do this is our parents and our students of how they will feel comfortable. I meet with our student councils from every school each year, and really ask them, what do you like about your school? What do you not like? What was challenging when you transitioned here? What do you think needs to happen to make this school better? And because I believe our student council are leaders, so they're in a leadership position that they were elected and voted to. And from those conversations and the conversations with our site councils and our parents, some ideas have come up that I just wasn't aware of, and because we hadn't had it here. And one of those is the concept of buddy benches on playgrounds. Across the country, one of the main concerns for kids is bullying, and it's everywhere. And so that's an opportunity to make sure that there isn't ongoing pervasive bullying of students. And we create friend groups, we have social settings, and we get involved right away. The buddy bench concept, when I had one of the schools student councils, it was a 5th grader that said, we need buddy benches. And I asked her, what's a buddy bench? And she said, at my old school, we had a buddy bench that if a student didn't have anybody to play with at recess, because everybody else is already doing something, you could go over to the buddy bench and hang out there and relax. And then others would know, hey, maybe that student wants to come play with us. And so it creates an opportunity for others to meet new friends. And that's just one idea that came from some other students. And
if I can interrupt you for a second, what I love about that concept, there's actually, I think, a TED Talk about a student who invented and created that buddy bench and rolled that out. But what I love about that, especially for elementary school kids, is that we, even as parents, tend to think that kids developmentally know how to muster the courage inside of themselves and communicate appropriately. Hey, I feel alone and I need somebody to talk to or to play with. And most kids don't developmentally have that ability yet. And so what that does is it creates that visual, and it also, I think, triggers compassion in students, which is also a great developmental thing to be, reminded of as kids. When you see that student that's over there, it kind of creates a forced choice, right? Will I be that student that reaches out and leads with compassion, or will I be the one that turns my back and keeps doing what I'm going to do? But I think for most kids, it brings up that empathy of I've been there before, especially as a military kid, if it is, right? I've been there before, and I've been that person that sat on the bench before. And so I'm going to welcome them in. Yeah. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. And that wasn't an idea that we came up with. That was brought to us. And so that's where we try to learn is, what are some other best practices that are good for kids and good for our mobile families? How do we make kids feel good and make them feel important and leaders of the school? And one of the other opportunities, because we have such a mobile population, was the idea of memory stones. At the elementary, if a student is leaving mid-year or even at the end of the year, they've been given a memory stone from their class. And that memory stone is an opportunity where before that child moves, they can pass the stone around where everyone in the class can say something to that student that's positive. I like that you were my partner on this project, or I think you're good at basketball, or whatever it may be. And so that that student can take that memory stone with them, and it's a reminder that there are important aspects of their involvement in this district. And it's how do we help kids in just, it's tough to be a kid right now. It's tough to grow up. It's tough to be in education. And so how can we make it easier knowing that it's challenging?
This is a crazy time to be alive and to run a school district with the coronavirus happening. And so, there's a lot of changes. I know we were, second semester, we were with you guys in your district on Fort Leavenworth. And again, I just want to say how great the communication was. I was part of a meeting where even the garrison commander at Fort Leavenworth was really praising and recognizing just how well you guys not only jumped into a new structure, a new way of teaching in that last semester, and really took on the challenge that we were all facing in a way that also met the needs of the relationships that you had with parents and students. And so even the garrison commander was talking about how well you guys did, but also that your communication was on point, that the frequency of communication with parents and students was not only important, but something that he leaned on and learned from you guys about. So as you are facing a new school year, share with everybody, share with the parents listening, maybe a little bit of what it's like behind the scenes to try to figure out how to do a new school year with a pandemic happening, with so many decisions that you have to make and so many changes. Because I think that, again, this is a two-way street, right? And I think we need to hear sometimes, like, what is it that you guys are going through and what do you need from us as parents, especially as we enter into this new semester?
I appreciate this topic. And my heart rate may have gone up a little bit as we started talking about it, because it's the unknown. And, as an educator, it has challenges. Our families face challenges, our soldiers, our students. It's like nothing we've ever been trained for or prepared for in education. And there wasn't a class that I took that said, hey, if all of a sudden there's a pandemic, here's what you need to do. So we tried to react effectively and purposefully to roll out the fourth quarter when the governor said Kansas schools are closed, the buildings are closed for students. Knowing that was a hard time for our teachers too. They're not able to see their students anymore. I had staff that would talk to me on a regular basis and were in tears. It was the blood, sweat, and tears time of how do we finish this year successfully and still continue relationships. We wanted to be mindful of parents' time at home, of kids' time, of confidentiality, of personal space. So we were protective on how we used Zoom for face-to-face. We were cautious on trying to do everything right, but also trying to let the students know we still care about you. We miss you. We want to be a part of it. And so that the relationship, social, emotional piece was a very significant aspect of what we tried to do for the fourth quarter of the school year. The academic side, we had support and guidelines, recommendations from the State Department, which I think they did across the country, but it's never a one size fits all. Here's your plan. Everybody's going to do it the same way, and it's going to work magically for everybody. So we had to react on the fly, and we worked hours and hours on end, 18, 19 hours a day for several days. I won't forget it over spring break, trying to get a plan ready for our students to then receive news at the end of that spring break, 2 days before we're getting ready to roll out, that there was a major change and we had to start over. And so
Wow.
what was most important and beneficial for us as a district was the patience, flexibility, and understanding of our families, because it really impacted everyone. So even moving forward to this fall, I am committed and hopeful, even though hope is not a method, that we will be back to brick and mortar education. That's what we're planning on. And quite frankly, that's easy. If we can do brick and mortar and we get back to what we've done, that's the easy transition. However, we know that it won't be that easy, that it'll all be 100% brick and mortar. So we need to figure out what a potential hybrid would look like. That may include brick and mortar, in-person education, as well as possible the digital as a hybrid. Or what if there is now another change where, at least in Kansas, the governor says school buildings are closed for a month? What does that look like? So we're making contingency plans for the unknown, so that we're working towards, I'd rather play offense than defense, and being prepared to say, okay, here's the guideline, the restriction, let's roll this out. Here's the change that just came across from the state or nationally. Here's this plan we roll out. That will still involve asking our parents to continue to advocate for their child, obviously, but also continue to be flexible, be patient, and help us help them in their education for their child.
I keep hearing you say how you talk with your staff and your teachers about how it's about building relationships and taking care of the kids and getting to know the parents and what those needs are. And you have such a servant heart in that. But I also know that you are leading out a district of staff and teachers, and that takes knowing who you're leading, right? And knowing what their needs are. And so what could we do as parents? Across the nation, I think that what you're trying to implement this year is a lot what a lot of school districts are trying to be prepared for too, right? They're all kind of, I'm hearing across the board, looking at brick and mortar or kind of that hybrid, or potentially going fully online again. And I know that creates a ton of anxiety for us parents at home, because we also don't know what to expect. And some of us don't feel like we were called to be teachers. And there's all that shame and guilt as parents too, right? So we're coming in like, I want to give my children back to school because you guys are so much better at it than I am. But at the same time, maybe as a parent, I should know how to do this, and so there's so much angst for everybody. I'm sure for your teachers as well, because they didn't sign up to become, a teacher, because they wanted it all to be online, right? That's not what they wanted to do from the beginning. They wanted to build those relationships with students. So could you share a little bit about what you're getting from your teachers and your staff, of what they need as we go into this school year? What do we parents need to know on how we can better build a relationship with the teachers and the staff of the school that our kids are about to go to, so we know where they're at in all of this?
That's a great question, and I think one of the best ways to approach that is an understanding that even we as educators have some angst. Even as I sit here as superintendent, wanting to be the true leader, the force behind every strong action that we take that's best for our families. I still have some angst to make sure, am I covering everything? Am I able to make sure that I've dotted every I and crossed every T? And that's kind of unnerving, because I know I haven't. And so while we'll continue to strive for perfection and excellence, the support and the understanding of our families will also be important, and sharing how their kids learn, sharing challenges that they have, the vulnerabilities. And I've encouraged my staff to also be vulnerable. And it's not a sign of weakness, in my opinion, to be able to say, this is hard for me. And I've never faced this before, but we're going to get through it. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to put in every bit of work necessary. My administrators, my deputy who's working on even the hybrids right now, hours and hours a day with a team to try and plan for the unknown, is something we're going to continue to do. And so when our families are able to share their own challenges of their kids. I had one parent contact me to say, Keith, this is hard. Can we please have a Zoom from the teacher? My two kids are having a challenge. I've got an elementary and a junior high kid. So immediately my mindset was, wow, that elementary child's probably having a hard time. And that wasn't it. The parent said, my junior high student has cried every day because they can't talk to staff. They're not used to not being social. And I didn't even think about it. I immediately went to the elementary student. And so that vulnerability or that conversation of, that was important. So I could reach out to the principal and say, listen, we're not rolling out Zoom to every class yet, but we need to make sure that we're finding which students need some support right now. And that comes through communication. And we want to be able to make changes, make adjustments on the fly, and know that to do something for the entire district, it may not be a perfect fit for every child, but we're sure going to try, by golly, to make it as best fit as possible. But we have to have a baseline of how that works. And so the families this year, I couldn't have been happier. I'm happy to hear that it was very successful. I know the garrison commander and General Rainey, Lieutenant General Rainey as the CG, were of great support. They communicated and it couldn't have gone better. I still had angst that we were doing enough, that it was supportive for our families, and families had the same angst. Like, is my child going to be okay educationally when we move on? Corey, that might have been a question or concern you have, not being in school for the last quarter of school. How is my child going to be successful now that we've had to move away? The response that I've shared with families is fourth quarter to go through something like no one's ever gone through educationally like this was the best time to test the waters. The academic standards and critical standards that all schools across the country focused on for the first 3 quarters set our students up for success. And the startup of next school year, there will be some challenges. As I know, our staff are coming back in about 4 weeks to start our school year. One of my first conversations with them is going to be, don't expect exactly like we've always had in the past. We've had students that haven't sat in a desk or chair for 4 or 5 months. If our expectation is for them to sit in rows, face forward, not move, and eyes straight ahead, we're not going to meet that expectation. As someone who is hyperactive and doesn't sit still very well, I wouldn't be successful walking in and being said, okay, sit in that chair, don't move, don't talk, because we have to relearn it. So we're what I'm asking for our teachers who are giving me great ideas and a phenomenal staff. I couldn't be happier with the team that we have, is to work with parents on, let's do this together. There are going to be some hurdles. Without a doubt, we will have some hurdles. We will face challenges, but with understanding, collaboration, and communication, we can work through them.
Keith, I can't even express how proud I am of how hard you've worked and how well you have led all of us. You've brought up some really interesting points, and I think that's a great way to say, it's all going to come down to communication. It's all going to come down to getting to know and starting over, right? Like if we had more time, we could totally talk about, like, what does this do to a young generation to be locked in your homes basically for months and months on end, where you take away sports, where you take away social interaction, you take away routine and structure, and so many of the things that feel familiar, right? Whether it's you go to church on Sundays or you do ball practice on Thursday night, like whatever that looks like, what does that do to a child and the resiliency of a child when they're now suddenly in the school again? And so I'm so thankful that you are thinking about that and preparing for that, because none of us know the answer, right? And I think that it varies based off of the personality of the child and what they do if they've felt that kind of constrained for that long. Not to mention, what all of our concerns are as parents is the amount of time a lot of our kids have spent with screens, right? Not just for school and 4th quarter, but now video games, because what do you do with your child other than TV, video games in their downtime? Because so many of our kids, that's how they're getting that social interaction right now. Yeah, there's so much that they're going to have to relearn. Yep. So I think I want to end with one final question for you. and I'm kind of hesitant to do it because it was such a great way to end, to say that we all just need to be compassionate and communicate just a little bit better. But I'm very curious, we started this conversation with you talking about how you went and got your doctorate and you were studying these 5 families on military transition and what it took for a child to do well academically and developmentally and be a kind of mobile military kid, right?
Right.
Since you have done that study and now having had the experience of leading these schools and staff and now going through what we've been through in the last, just even 6 months, what would you say you have learned that maybe the top 3 things, if you could pick that, like what are the top 3 things that you've noticed that a child needs or has, or what needs to be present for that child to do well in school, even though we might be moving as frequently as military families do? I know that might be a tough question, but
it is a tough question, but I honestly can't think of much more of an important question than that, Corey. It's such a large topic, but the aspects of what a child needs have changed, like you said, from 6 months ago. If you asked me 6 months ago this question, my answer might be different. But right now, one of the top ones, and these wouldn't necessarily be in rank order, but I would say social emotional support is one. And that can be defined in many ways, whether that's social emotional from the family unit. How does that look? Is there some family time now? As I said, 5 boys. Video games is a big thing right now, and that's how they're talking to their friends. But I miss my boys too. So I want to have some conversations. We take the dog on a walk. We watch some TV shows together, as simple as that is. But that social emotional aspect of the family relationship is very important. The next layer of that social emotional relationship is really between the school and the student. And that's one thing that was so important from the teachers at Fort Leavenworth this year, is they missed that. That was one of the hardest aspects, is they just wanted to see their kids, talk to their kids, see the smiling faces. I had staff tell me, Keith, I'm afraid I'm going to cry on Zoom in front of my kids and scare them. And my response was, then hold up a piece of paper that says, I miss you, while you're crying behind it, but understand your kids are probably going to be crying too. And that social emotional relationship between the school and the teachers and the students is very important. A third aspect would be the social emotional support of kids with kids. How do they play again? How do they get outside? Is it sports, which we don't even know the future of organized athletics? Is it play at recess? Is it physical education? What is it to help them integrate social emotionally with each other? And I think social emotional between the parents and the staff and the teachers is also important. Help us help the parents, and have the parents help us help them with their kids, because that greater understanding is significant. So social emotional is such a big piece. Vulnerability of change. And under vulnerability, we could define that as flexibility, kind of playing offense and playing defense, addressing the unknown. There will be things that happen that we have to address on the fly. Our natural response as adults, as parents, as educators is, well, here's what you should do, or here's what I need to do. But that's not necessarily the right thing for everyone. So that vulnerability of understanding that there's going to be a give and take, there's going to be an up and down, there's going to be some challenges, some disagreements, but we've got to work through it. And it's not personal. It's for the right reasons. It's for the kids. And that's a number one, that everything that I do and that I ask our staff to do and that our parents do is for the success of kids. And while I have 5 boys of my own, biological, I also consider that the almost 1,900 kids here is my own. And what would I do for them shouldn't be any different than what I would do for my own 5. And so I'll never get parent of the year. I've made mistakes as a parent, and I've made mistakes as an administrator, but I will always try and make the mistake right for helping kids. and never have it be something that doesn't support them. And then just understanding that this is new for all of us. We've had conversations with staff. I've had conversations with post command and families of every situation is different, from loss of employment to the lack of interest in learning anymore from home because it's not at school. And so having an understanding of what we need to do to just chip away at it. There's, I'm working on a plan for what reintegration looks like for staff and students. We're working on a curriculum plan for instruction and what that looks like for staff and students. And it's not going to be a catch-all. It's going to be as best as we can get, and we're going to adjust on the fly. And I think those are the aspects from social emotional to vulnerability, flexibility, and understanding. And with all of those, the overarching theme has to be communication.
Keith, thank you so much for your honesty. I can also honestly say as a parent, that's the most important quality in my experience of you and the district and all the schools and the staff there, is that you cared about my kids. And that came through in every interaction, in every phone call, and in every parent meeting. And in my kids' experience with your teachers as well. And so I can't thank you enough for giving us a fantastic year, even during a pandemic, where our kids grew, they made friends, they developed as they should have, and it really experienced the relief of what it feels like as a military kid to be loved. So thank you so much for that time, and thank you for joining me for the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Life Giver podcast. If you're enjoying these episodes, please share the podcast with other service couples that may benefit from the show. If you're feeling especially grateful, head on over to patreon.com/lifegiver or find the link in today's show notes, where for just a couple of dollars, you can help breathe life into more service families. If you'd like more information about me or Life Giver, head on over to CoreyWeathers.com or life-giver.org.